Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Richa Parikh, and I'm a co-founder at The Honor Till. Today is a very special day. It is Teachers' Day, and on this day, I have the absolute honor of speaking with Ms Suniti Sharma, ex-principal of MGD Girls School, Jaipur, and an illustrated educator. Ms. Sharma, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It is also personally a very special conversation for me because I too am a student of MGD Girls School, and I spent the most formative years of my life in that school. So if I have a few butterflies as I speak with you today, you know why. I'm so honored to speak with you today. Welcome.
Thank you, Richa. It's a pleasure to meet you again, this time online. And yes, I look forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. So I want to start this conversation by knowing a little bit more about you. I know about you, but I want to know from your own, in your own words, about a little bit more about you, so that the rest of the audience also can get to know you like we do.
Right. Well, basically, I grew up in Delhi. My father was a doctor in the army, and we grew up in this big bungalow which had a whole row of servants' quarters attached to it, lots of people living there. And ever since I was a child, I remember we used to play with those children. And one of our favorite games used to be playing school. And I'd invariably end up being teacher and they would learn. And actually, later on, it almost became like formal classes that I would help them with their studies. And it was probably something instinctive that made me think about teaching as a career. I mean, there was some expectation that I would study medicine, but it never really interested me. And I studied at Delhi University, did my B.Ed, and a few months later got a job, and that's how I got into teaching and stayed on until I retired 2 years ago. I moved after I got married. I moved to Gwalior, worked in schools in Gwalior, then did a short stint in Kuala Lumpur. It was a CBSE school, the first one in the country, and very exciting being with the school in the initial stages. And then came to MGD Jaipur, from where I retired. So teaching has always been a passion. It's something I feel very happy when I'm in a school situation, and I enjoy it thoroughly. I've been lucky to have worked in schools where there was a lot of scope for experimentation always. Even I was never in a school, whether it was the Air Force School in Delhi or the two Scindia schools, or the one in KL and MGD, where there were never very strict monitoring of teachers or rigid constraints that you had to work within. So there was a scope for experimentation, and I had lots of fun trying out all kinds of ideas and learning from them. Some didn't work as well, some worked very well, and I think through that gradually shaped a philosophy of education. It's also, I think, interesting that I worked in almost all the schools I worked in had a hostel as well, boarding schools. So you were responsible for those children 24 hours of the day. It wasn't just a few hours in a day. And in that sense, I think teachers played a far more important role in shaping attitudes and personalities than you would in a day school.
Absolutely. Having been a part of the boarding school at MGD, I understand what a role all of our teachers and wardens in our hostels played in, shaping the personalities and attitude towards life. You said it so well. You've had such an illustrious career in education. I mean, it's amazing, and it's almost sounds like you were always just genuinely inclined towards teaching and educating students around you, and you've done that for such a long time. uh, what in your experience of such a long illustrious career in education, has been some of these changes that you've observed through through these years as education has been taking different shape in through decades and through, I think, almost new generations, right?
Yeah. Uh, of course, the pandemic is a different issue. Things have changed completely thanks to that. But sure, there have been a lot of changes. I think children are much more exposed to the outside world now. When they come into school, they're bringing a whole lot of things with them because they have access to so many other sources. I mean, for us, information only came out of the school library or from the textbook or from the teacher.
Yes.
And as a result, obviously, the approach to teaching and listening to a teacher has changed. There's also, I think, a little bit of erosion of some of the values that we had. We trusted the school system completely. And I found that in my initial years when I joined as a teacher, that children had faith in the examinations, for instance. They believed that they were fair assessments. Mm-hmm. And over the years, I found that eroding a little, children getting more and more cynical in a sense, because there was so much publicity given to what is wrong with examinations, or there were so many cases where examinations were not conducted properly. In the same way, many of the other things in school, perhaps it's because of greater communication. Perhaps children see a lot more of the school and their teachers outside of the classroom. But you learn a lot. As a child, you learn a lot outside a classroom. You learn through observation, you learn through experiences. You go on a school trip and you learn a lot about relationships and independence and integrity, for that matter. And you know, if your teachers are not going to be role models, if you are in an environment where the teachers are being criticized, and unfortunately that's happening in a lot of homes, where parents might sometimes be critical of a teacher in the presence of a child.
Right.
All that has led to a different kind of relationship. That we talk of India being a country where there's a lot of respect for teachers. And I think some of that has begun to wear out. People are seeing teachers as much more human in a sense, not ideal people. And some of the systems also, there's been a loss of faith in those systems, which is unfortunate. But on the other hand, classroom interaction has become a lot more exciting. With technology having come in, there is a lot more scope for experimentation, a lot more for independent learning by children. And in that sense, the teacher's role has changed. So I think the primary role of a teacher, apart from carrying out the transaction of a subject, is character building. Because it is only in the formative years in school that your character and values are formed, that you are receptive to them.
Yes.
I think later in life, it's harder to change what's become habits or ways of thinking. So teaching has changed a lot. And another thing that, if we think about what kind of challenges teachers face, I think what's happened everywhere is that the product has become more important than the process. And when I say that, whether we're talking of examination, the marks are important, and it sometimes doesn't really matter how you've got those marks. You can buy a project in a market and submit it as your own. So you can get graded, but you haven't learned anything in the process. So that it requires persistence, it requires commitment if you really want to focus on a process.
Yeah.
And there's a common tendency to blame the board because you get loaded with so much syllabus to handle. that there's no time to do other things, that you need to complete certain things. But actually, that's not true.
Right.
Up to class 8, at least you have complete freedom to do what you want. No board specifies anything that needs to be taught, any textbooks. How you teach is entirely up to you. And that's why I said I was lucky to be able to experiment in schools. We did all kinds of things which you would never do in with a textbook. But we learned. When classes worked, the kids managed to master all the learning outcomes that were required. So it's really ultimately, the role of the teacher is what is so important, to create that culture within a classroom where learning is happening, and it's happening in a fun way.
Absolutely.
In an enjoyable way, where curiosity is being aroused and everyone's learning and moving together as a team. This whole business of recognizing achievements all the time, picking out a few students, awarding them for some achievement, I don't think that's a great trend. I mean, I'm glad that the system of ranking has been done away with. But that has not changed in the parents' mindset. Parents still want to know, is my child first in class or is he third or whatever?
Yes.
And what we should really be celebrating is qualities of character, if you ask me, not achievements so much. And we need to shift that focus away from the product and really concentrate on the processes of learning.
That is,
it may not always be successful. Yeah.
That is such an impactful thing that you said. And this reminds me of something that I'd heard before, that it's always the journey that matters. Like, the destination is more like means to an end, but your journey is what you should enjoy. And if you focus so much on the end result and what you're trying to get to in the end, you kind of miss out on that entire process. And you said that so well. And I think the whole point of character building, and not obsessing so much about the data points that indicate if A is better than B or not. These are all such subjective constraints. Talking about experimentation, you trusted Honor Till, a very, very abstract concept where we said, hey, we want to run this concept at MGD. We want to work with students on not a textbook concept about honesty, but actually experience what it feels like to apply it in real life. What made you take that chance? Clearly, you believe in experimentation, but what made you believe in adopting Honor Till is what I would say.
Well, I think we in school are always looking for avenues to inculcate values that are important in the children. And it's a fact that children listen much more to someone who comes from outside than to their own teachers, because there's a novelty value attached or something. So when Mrs. Parekh came to me with this idea, and she said she'd seen it in the US in operation in some vegetable store, I think, farmer's market. I thought it was a perfect way to reinforce what we really wanted the children to inculcate. And one of the reasons, especially in boarding schools, petty thefts are very common. And in fact, it's so petty, it's a bit of stationery or toiletries or little bits of cash lying around, whatever, that no one really takes them seriously.
Yes.
And that always bothered me. I mean, I remember telling children that if you lose something, you must make a noise about it. You must let the class know you've lost it and how you feel a sense of loss because of it, and at least make an attempt to try and find it. And I studied in a convent school, and there we had moral science as a subject. And I remember our nuns would often hold up a full class if there was a theft in the class. And they would say, we are not interested in knowing who did it, but we're interested in the fact that whatever was stolen should be returned. So they'd give us the option that you could quietly go and put back what you had taken if you had taken something that didn't belong to you. So, whereas when you dismiss it, never mind, it's all a part of school life, you lose things, it's okay, don't waste time over it. You are kind of undermining the honesty that you want your children to have. And I thought this would be a great way to give the children a chance to learn that the onus of responsibility lies on them. You don't have to be honest because someone is watching you or someone will punish you if you're dishonest, but you have to be honest because it's the right thing to do. And we'd done something similar in one of the schools I worked in. In fact, we had conducted examinations without any invigilation.
Oh.
We told the children, you know, the point of the exam is to assess you. So you do it honestly, you'll get the fair assessment. You do it dishonestly, you will know it's the wrong assessment. And it worked. I mean, the whole school had exams where the teacher would come in, give out papers, and then go sit outside the classroom. And of course, in the same way, I thought you need to be honest in an examination, not because there's an invigilator sitting there and waiting to catch you out. So even with the honor till, there was the total onus lay on the child. And I was really happy to see the outcome. I mean, I actually did not anticipate that all the children would embrace the idea so wholeheartedly. And I think it also drove home another fact that very often children get desperate over tiny things. They don't have an eraser and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to get it. So they're tempted to pick up, steal someone else's. When you make these things easily available to them, there's no need for that desperation. I think a lot of unnecessary energy goes into these things. So that idea appealed to me. I thought it would help to counter this problem of stealing that was happening all the time. And at the same time, it would create some solidarity with other schools where everyone would be learning from each other what honesty is all about.